Hello, everybody. This episode has some adult language, but is otherwise, depending on your personal beliefs and parenting styles, is suitable for all ages. With that in mind, as you ready your ears to participate in the story, I once again thank you for being here. Please join me after the episode for a brief look inside the story. Without further delay, this is Short Stories with Stefan, Episode 9, Finding Francis. It is odd that cemeteries can feel both like a museum of history and a mass grave. The embellished plaques, the rising headstones, and the engraved legacies of those who only survived through memory are freckled all across the face of this land dedicated to the dead. Setting the splintered wooden shovel with its chipped metal head back up against the shack, Sebastian removed his suit jacket in one movement, like a baton twirler throwing a baton high in the air. He tried to brush off the brittle, dry, clay-like earth which now acted as another potent layer of epidermis. He was a tall man, broad shoulders with dark eyes, and he carried a Greek nose and Mediterranean curls on his oval head. Sebastian was no stranger to waking from the dead, though I imagine it would be difficult for anyone to continue to find themselves awake at the bottom of a tomb. That is also why the attendees at his funeral found it odd that he had written in his will to be buried with a shovel. He was the one who designed the grave, because all it took was coming back to life once and having to scratch his way to the surface for him to understand how much time he'd save if a shovel accompanied him on his death nap. He sauntered to the street and hailed a cab, looking as casual as a boy falling out of a pile of soot. No use in explaining his current state to whichever unlucky cabbie with clean seats may be his chariot. And yet he found slight amusement at the continuing uniqueness of each cab driver's look of shock and awe upon his entrance to their vehicle. 46th and Broadway, please. Time was a continual teacher to Sebastian, as she is to us all, and for over 300 years the young immigrant boy from Europe had been returning from the dead with more knowledge to disseminate onto the field of his next life. Acceptance of his condition had by now, without pun intended, become a total thing of the past. The gift of acceptance opens the door for proper planning should it happen again. It being death and coming back from this dark place, being the life Sebastian continued to discover he was living. By now, he was an absolute master of creating a new identity and thus beginning a new life. When he arrived home to the new apartment he'd leased before his passing, and the name that he would eventually become accustomed to, he was greeted by the only friend he would see from his previous life. Brutus, the Rottweiler mix, was a giant dog whose ability to scare off intruders was matched only by his skill to snore loud and cuddle Sebastian into near oblivion while he slept. Brutus acted as a bridge of mental and emotional stability. Sebastian learned early on, not being able to communicate with people who you love takes a harsh toll on the heart and soul. Brutus, and the pups who came before him, act as guides as he grows back into whatever man he decides to exist as. He stopped at the safe room, a Fort Knox of personal security, which he had installed prior to his departure from life. This room held two large safes. One was full of money, should he need it in case of an emergency. Another was burdened by his immense sense of nostalgia. It is within this second safe where another locked box lives, and inside it are physical copies of passcodes, deeds, and irreplaceable possessions like letters. He had letters from family, friends, wives, children, and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The written word never dies as long as it is able to be read, and thus, Sebastian felt most human when he sat down on occasion to reread those letters. After he allowed himself a moment to breathe in the smell of the lives which he'd previously lived, he closed up the safe and headed for the shower. Not many things felt as refreshing as a hot shower after ascending from the deep hole that is one's grave. He relished the time in the shower. It was a baptism of sorts that went deeper than the dirt that clung to his skin like dried glue. He washed off death that he may better prepare himself for life once more. Sebastian's condition is a curious one. He himself was unaware of how it all worked until that fateful day in 1916. He and the love of that life were in Central America on a mission trip for their church when she contracted yellow fever. He was as healthy as can be, a vision of vitality, and yet, when she breathed her last breath, he followed her to the grave. Upon waking from this unpleasant slumber, he connected the dots which painted a picture of his fate. When the person he loves most in the world dies, he dies as well. After that, Sebastian held both life and love on a higher level in his mind and a deeper level in his heart. Despite this extraordinary ability to continually cheat death out of his right to his life, he felt fairly ordinary. Before realizing the potential good he was capable of bringing about, he lived mundane day-to-day lives. However, after understanding the gravity of his gift, he went to great lengths to never repeat the same mistakes, but to continue to give out bigger and bigger blessings. While he was the world's wealthiest man, in secret that is, his wealth continues to grow outside of his pockets in schools, libraries, churches, foster centers, and countless other philanthropic ventures. He found immense joy at the prospect of giving money away. Perhaps it was a dire lack of his own education which compelled him to create as much opportunity for others as he could. 3 days after his most recent return to the land of life, there was a knock on his door. Brutus lifted his head and lowered his growl to a protective, quiet roar. Sebastian was expecting no one, and no one should be at his house either. He looked through the peephole in the door but didn't see anyone. He cracked the door open and then opened it all the way when he saw who had knocked. There, standing in the rain, was a little girl. She was no more than 4 feet tall, had sandy brown hair that was high in a messy ponytail. She wore dimples on her cheeks, had a small nose and a little forehead, and her top lip seemed to come forward only a little more than her bottom. She had hazel eyes that searched Sebastian in an instant, and she stood tall, not like a child, but like a recruiter. She was wearing a puffy blue jacket which looked like a cloud, and this went down to her knees, where it met knee-high red rain boots that seemed to be one size too big for her. She was holding an umbrella over her little head like she was Mary Poppins, and she looked up at him and said, "Hello, my name is Victoria." He was perplexed. "Hello, are you selling Girl Scout cookies or something? Where are your parents?" The little girl rolled her eyes and said, "Do I look like a Girl Scout to you, Mr. Zombie? And my parents are busy. I told them I needed to run a few errands." He was taken aback. "You are out here without adults?" She motioned around her and then retorted, "Mr. Zombie, sir, does it look like I have my parents here? I already told you they're busy, and in case you didn't notice, it's raining, so may I come in?" Sebastian cracked a smile at the obvious amount of confidence held inside this little person. "I'm sorry, little lady, but I can't let you in. Let me grab my phone and call you a cab, or your parents." As he turned to grab his phone, he remembered something she'd said. "Victoria, right?" She nodded. "Did you call me Mr. Zombie?" She nodded again. "Why, exactly?" She put her free hand in her jacket pocket, making her now look like a very proper person. "Because, mister, I saw you crawl out from the grave a few days ago. I was visiting my grandma's grave, and I saw you. I don't know much about zombies, but if you're it, then Hollywood has got the whole mold way off." He was stunned, but then she said, "Don't worry whether or not I'm concerned about you being a molester or a kidnapper or something." She pulled a phone out of her pocket and showed it to him. "This is my phone, and if I don't check it with my parents every 20 minutes, then they use the tracker in the phone to either come find me or call the police. My daddy is a very important man." Stunned by this eyewitness account, he searched for the words to say. Victoria interpreted his silence as an invitation to enter. She walked right past him and was greeted by the no longer on guard, Brutus. He began licking and nuzzling up to this new little stranger with his tail wagging like a jump rope in action. Sebastian didn't know what to do. The only other person in his existence who had ever seen him exit his grave was a groundskeeper by the name of Earl Groening. That was 1971, and poor Earl was shocked to the point of a heart attack and died. Sebastian had felt horrible, donating enough money to his family to cover the entire cost of a most extravagant funeral reception, with anonymity, of course. Wow, I didn't know zombies could decorate this good. Victoria strolled around the room as if it was her own. She'd removed her boots at the door, revealing pink and green socks on little feet. "I'm not a zombie," Sebastian finally said. "You were dead, right?" "Well, yes, I technically died." Sebastian crossed his arms. "Then you came back to life, right?" She continued to pet Brutus, and had he been a cat, a purr by now would be echoing throughout his bulky body. "Well, yes, but zombie. That is like the basic zombie profile." She had both the tone and apparent candor of a person beyond her age. She spoke with confidence in her words. She didn't speak like children often do, measuring their words as they exit, trying to gauge whether or not they've learned the right social cues and words to partner with them. "I'm sorry, but how old are you?" He remained standing, but she sat down on the sofa in the living room, and Brutus jumped on the couch and then looked up at Sebastian as if he was the stranger who knocked on the door. "I'm 10, but Grandma used to always say age doesn't indicate brains, and that she knew plenty of old people who were more dumb than a bag of shit." He covered his laugh at this statement with a cough. He was pretty sure he had never heard a child speak this way to anyone, let alone a stranger. "Do you walk into strangers' houses often?" Nope. Okay, well, I'm not sure what you thought you saw, but I'm not a zombie, and I did not come out of the ground. She fumbled for her phone again, and taking it out of her pocket, she aimed the screen at Sebastian. So what you're saying is this isn't you exiting a tomb? On her screen was a video of him exiting the grave and then moving to get the shovel and fix his spot. He was overcome with fear and worry, and obvious stress crossed his face. This must have been clear to the little stranger sitting on his couch petting his dog, because she said, "Don't worry. I haven't shown it to anyone, and I won't either. If," she paused. If what? Was he really about to be extorted for money by a 10-year-old little girl? "If you teach me how to be a zombie." She spoke like she was asking him to teach her how to ride a bike, not trying to understand his secret to eternal life. What? Teach me. Teach me how to come back from the dead. She outstretched her arms like Frankenstein's monster and crossed her eyes. Sebastian continued to find Victoria perplexing and interesting, and he let his arms fall to his side. "I can't teach you that, and I'm not a zombie." "Fine," she said, looking up at the ceiling. "To the internet with this, then." "Wait," said Sebastian. "You can't be serious." He had never been in this situation before, and it was odd that over 300 years of total life would not give him any tools for this exact moment. She hesitated, then began typing on her phone. He made to move like he was going to reach for it, but stopped. She noticed his restraint and said, "Relax. I'm only checking in with my parents." He settled into his chair, letting out a long sigh. What could he do? He thought about lying. He considered picking her up and setting her outside while he called the police or her parents. He considered these things and more. However, one thing which eternal life had taught him was that lying to children only made them lying adults. He decided to tell the truth the best he could. "Look, Victoria, it's not that I don't want to teach you. It is that I cannot. I can't because I don't know how." "Don't know what?" "I don't know how it works. I don't know how I come back to life. I just did one day." "Oh." Sebastian noticed that she didn't look disappointed. She seemed to be in deep thought. "How long have you lived?" He did not expect this question, but then again, he didn't know what to expect at this point. "Over 300 years." Wow. Her eyes grew into two huge circles at this new information. 300 years? He nodded. "So you've, seen the country get built, right?" He felt a smile come across his face. "Yeah, in a way I have." "Okay," she sat up straighter. "Maybe you can't teach me how to live forever, but can you teach me everything you've learned about?" "What do you mean?" "I want to know what it would be like to live for 300 years. Her hazel eyes were shimmering now, her face full of excitement, and her hands gripped the couch. He contemplated this, but before he could respond, she cut him off, which he was getting more and more used to. "You don't have to answer now. I'll come back tomorrow. Same time. Give me an answer then. I promise I won't release the video until I hear the answer." With that, she stood up and walked towards the door, put on her blue puffy jacket, her red boots, and grabbed her umbrella from behind the door. She turned after opening the door and extended her hand. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Zombie." He shook her hand and said, "You can call me Sebastian." "Nice to meet you, Sebastian." Brutus walked up behind Sebastian, and she reached down to rub his head and scratch his chin. "Nice to meet you, Victoria." With that, she closed the door behind her and walked away, out into the rain, and didn't turn around. Sebastian did not think she needed him to call her a cab. He was under the impression that she didn't need people to do anything for her. After she left, he heard Brutus whimper and whine. "What are you whining about? You just met her." Brutus began pawing at the door. Sebastian began to think. He had never been able to tell any of his children or grandchildren or even great-grandchildren all of his stories. His stories of past lives died with him and lived on as long as a living descendant told them. Otherwise, they lived without sunlight, in his safe. But what could he tell her? What possible knowledge could a 10-year-old hold on to from his hundreds of years of experience? Children are often far removed from death, and trying to explain to them both life and death seemed a difficult task. That night, laying in bed, Sebastian thought about Frances, his youngest daughter at one point. She was ferocious and level-headed, and she always asked incredible questions. He thought back to one night in particular that had been a gem he held close to his soul. "Daddy?" "Yes, my love." "Do you love Mommy more than me?" Sebastian was stunned at the question. "I love your mama differently than I love you." "Differently?" "Yes, because I could never love you as much as I love Mommy, but I could also never ever love Mommy as much as I love you. To me, you are both your own universe, and I am the lucky planet who gets to watch you shine." Frances blushed. "Daddy, you are smart. I hope to be as smart as you one day." Sebastian pushed her wispy little hair off of her forehead and gave it a kiss. I hope to be as smart as you one day, my little love. With that, he wished her a good night and then headed to bed. He couldn't share all of this knowledge with Francis, but maybe he could with Victoria. And maybe he would. The next day, at the same time as she promised, Victoria showed up at the house. She knocked with the same purpose as the day before, only today it wasn't raining. When Sebastian opened the door, she said, "Good afternoon, Sebastian the zombie." He smiled and again assured her that Sebastian was fine. "So, do you have an answer?" She was wearing green frog leggings, and despite the sun, she still wore the red boots, but was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Pause and love a dog." "Yes." He opened the door for her to enter. "I'll teach you everything you want to know." "Fantastic. My first question is..." Whoa. Sebastian stopped her at the door as she started to barrel her way past him to get to Brutus. "There are some guidelines. I will only share what you ask about, and I will only answer 1 or 2 questions a day." Victoria was well prepared for these guidelines, and without missing a beat, walked past him and removed her boots. "Okay," she embraced Brutus. "I can live with that set of stipulations. Where did you learn to use big words?" "I read a lot." She sat on the couch, and Brutus draped over her like a heavy blanket. "I got a lot of time on my hands because Mom and Dad are busy all the time. They're important people." "Yeah." He brought out water for them both, then sat in the chair opposite her. "You mentioned that." "Okay, I have my first question. All ready?" You have to always be ready to ask an important question. Sebastian sipped his water, trying to look like he knew what he would say when she asked her question. "All right, go ahead. What is it like to know you'll never die?" At this, Sebastian shifted in his seat. This was a thought he had not contemplated for years, and in fact, it was hard for him to think of a rational response now. He looked at the little girl in front of him and remembered all he could do was tell the truth the best he could. At first, it is exhilarating, like you are a god among people. This fades though, because I can die, I only do not stay dead. What kills you? I die when the person I love most in this world dies too. Oh, so like only your wife or husband. Yeah, so far anyway. This was true. Just because this had been a way he discovered he could die did not mean it was the only way. Okay, what happens once you know you're not God? That would be 3 questions in one day. No, it's all one big question, and these are all like little parts of it. He laughed at her rationalization. He imagined, with such a level of confidence at this age, her doing something spectacular with her life. She held the confidence that you see only in people like Amelia Earhart. He couldn't help but go along with her eagerness. For me, it was like realizing I could control a dream, but only my own. What do you mean? A dream is something which you know is not real once you wake up, but once you know you are in a dream, then you begin to do things as if you are awake. I began to live my life like a dream I could control, enjoying it for as long as I was allowed. Everyone has different dreams. I'm sure that you would live forever differently than I. Well, that's obvious. She smiled when she said this, and he laughed at her candor. She was gentle to remove Brutus from her lap and stood up. "Could I use your restroom?" "Yes." He pointed to the left. "It's the second door on the left." He thought he heard something odd, and when she returned to sit on the couch, she seemed to look more pale. "Are you feeling all right?" "Never better," she said, smiling. "I have to go, though. Same time tomorrow?" "Of course." Then she stood up, gave Brutus a big hug, pulled her boots back on, and shook Sebastian's hand. "See you tomorrow, Sebastian. See you tomorrow, Victoria." Then he closed the door and turned back around to find Brutus moping on the ground. "Oh, stop your whining. She's coming back." Though, as he said this, he felt odd, concerned that these parents would let their little girl roam the streets and visit strangers' houses, if they even had any idea at all. He planned to ask Victoria these questions the next day, but she seemed ready for them, showing him pictures of a lovely couple and her in front of a fireplace somewhere. She talked about how much they valued independence, and how she was in a self-defense class and had read books on how to spot danger in people you know and don't know. "It's more likely to be the cool uncle in my family than a total stranger who's going to do something bad to me." She said this so matter-of-factly that Sebastian looked up the statistic after she left, and it turned out that she was right. She visited his house every day for 6 weeks. She never missed a day, and more important, Victoria never wasted a visit with a shallow question. "Okay, if you never fall in love, then could you live forever?" "Impossible." "Explain," and she folded her arms. "It is impossible not to fall in love. Everyone loves someone, even if it is only one person in the whole world." Victoria seemed saddened by this. "I don't think I'd want to live forever, though. It might be harder if I never had to die and restart." Even more morose if I never loved anyone. No, I know. She put her face up against Brutus's. Then why do you look saddened by my answer? I wish I could live forever. He noticed her eyes were more sunken in today, her skin more sallow than last he saw her. You're young. I'm sure you'll live a long time too. At this, she seemed to shake off some cloud which had formed around her and smiled. You're right, she said. Then she left. This was how her visits went. She entered the room with a tornado of curiosity, and then with the same level of energy exited and went home. One day, Sebastian gave the numbers she had given him, which were supposed to be her parents, a call. When both numbers were said to be disconnected, she explained that her parents were on a business trip and her babysitter didn't give out her phone number. Sebastian was suspicious, but not enough to pry deeper. Even though he felt in his gut that she may be stretching the truth of her parents knowing where she was, he chose ignorance. He selfishly loved their conversations, and he'd never been able to share his stories and experiences with anyone fully before. Then one day, without warning, she stopped showing up. After a week went by, Sebastian tried the numbers again, then tried to look up her parents, but both attempts turned up nothing. Hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst, he took a trip to the nearest hospital. Hi, he said to the nurse at the front desk. I'm looking for a little girl by the name of Victoria. She's got brown hair and hazel eyes. She's 10. I'm her piano teacher, and I've not seen her in a week. Her parents aren't responding either, and I don't know. I thought I'd check here, I guess. The nurse was surrounded by papers and telephones with blinking lights, while she typed furiously on her keyboard, not looking up at him once. By the look of the bags which hung under each pupil, it seemed sleep was not a common occurrence in her current profession. You got a last name for this girl? He remembered back to the visit when Victoria did share this. Flangard. Yeah, go ahead and laugh. All the kids do. It's a stupid name. When I'm old enough, I'm going to change it. To what? To Lightning. Because I love lightning. I think that's a great idea. You do? She wrapped her arms tight around Brutus. I think you and Lightning have much more in common than you know. She smiled at this. He was brought back to the present moment by the fluorescent lights pounding his eyes with bright white color, and the nurse speaking to him. Sir, if you ain't got a name, then I can't help you. Flangard. The nurse looked at him, both eyes locked. You said you were her piano teacher? She paused from typing. That's right. You didn't happen to notice how sick she looked? The nurse was speaking as if she too was close to this little girl. Well, she seemed under the weather sometimes, but I thought she probably wasn't sleeping. She's upstairs, in room 504. Ask for Dr. Dulene when you get to the front desk. Then she went back to typing and picked up the phone. Thank you. He walked to the elevator and pressed 5. The door opened and he walked to the front desk and followed the nurse's instructions. Within a few short minutes, Dr. Dulene appeared. Hi there. How can I help you? A lean cartoon figure with hilarious glasses was standing in front of Sebastian now, and he found it hard not to smile at him. Perhaps this is what made him a great doctor, because hospitals can be frightening, and smiling is a sign that everything will be all right. I'm looking to visit a friend of mine, a student. Her name is Victoria Flangard. Ah, you mean Victoria Lightning. Or at least, that's who she is to me. Sebastian chuckled, knowing he was in the right place. Yes, that is definitely the one. He followed the doctor into room 504, and there, lying in a hospital bed, was what looked like a ghost of the little lightning bolt who had blackmailed him over a month ago. Her long brown hair was replaced by white flesh, her hazel eyes surrounded by a darkness of pure exhaustion, and her red boots sat on the chair opposite her. She didn't move. The doctor whispered, She's sleeping, but her eyes are open. That happens a lot with our cancer patients. It's like the eyes are too afraid to close all the way for fear that they won't open again. I'm sorry, Sebastian leaned a little closer. Did you say cancer? Yes, I assumed you knew she has leukemia. Not much time left, I'm afraid. And we're trying to make her last few weeks as full of love as possible. Lord knows she's done that for us. I don't understand. Where is her family, her parents? The doctor looked surprised. Well, I thought you said you knew her. I do, I really do, but she only ever showed up and left on her own accord for lessons. She said she was checking in with her parents every 20 minutes. She gave me a phone number and address, but I discovered neither were legit. The doctor looked bemused and engulfed with sadness all at once. I'm sorry to tell you this, but Victoria is an orphan. Her parents died in a car crash 2 years ago. She was living with her grandmother up until last year, but she had a massive heart attack and died. She's been at St. Anne's orphanage down the street this last year. Sebastian felt his heart sinking and his head whirling. How could he have been this dull? To not notice that the lightning bolt that kept striking conversation at his expense was becoming less and less alive. I'll leave you alone then. If you're a friend, it'll be good to wake her up to see a familiar face. Not many visits from the orphanage. As if he was either waking a lion from a slumber or trying to pick a flower out of a thicket, he began to stir her awake. She moved with a slight twitch and then turned to the side of the bed, where she retched out a loud, hoarse vomit. The doctor rubbed her back. "Little Miss Lighting, you have a visitor." She turned over, and in that moment, Sebastian wished he would have brought Brutus to be her blanket of comfort. "Sebastian," she whimpered, but a smile walked across her gaunt face. "I guess I have been in this stupid bed for a while, huh?" The doctor smiled and set the remote in her hand, reminding her that should she need anything, she need only press the button. "Why didn't you tell me you were dying?" Sebastian pulled up a chair. "I was hoping you could teach me how not to." At this, Sebastian felt tears beginning to build around his eyes like a slow-moving army. "Why didn't you tell me you were an orphan? I have money. I could have helped you. I like talking to you like a grown-up. It was how my parents would talk to me. Everyone else looks at me with pity." He laughed at her remark. "You also laugh at the funny stuff I say. I used to make my grandma pee from laughing. No one at the orphanage thinks I'm funny. Ever since I made a joke about Catholics, orphanage workers have been worried I'd influence the other kids." "I hope you have." And they both giggled at the idea of nuns trying to shoo her comedy out of earshot from the other children. "Listen, Victoria, I'm so sorry." "For what?" "I learned a lot about being a zombie." "Listen, can you do me a ginormous favor?" "Can't really leave my bed unless you're out to ask me to puke. I can do that all day, I've discovered." She smirked, and it was a most impressive smirk. "No. Please don't do that more than you have to. I need you to promise me that you will not die in the next 2 hours." Wow. For someone who's not a zombie, that's pretty morbid, but yeah, okay, I'll do my best. Then she gave a sarcastic thumbs up. He stood up, wiped off the cold sweat that was gathered on her forehead with a nearby cloth, and kissed it, then left the hospital. He gave the doctor his number and said that if anything happened, if there were any complications at all, that he should call at once. Then he went home, ran upstairs, and began to write like a madman. When he was done writing, he opened the safe with the lockbox in it and grabbed it. It was heavier than he last remembered. He drove like a madman to the hospital with Brutus buckled in his passenger seat. Almost to the hospital, an accident had happened on the main road, and he was now sitting 2 blocks away from the hospital in dead-stop traffic. His phone rang. A nurse said Victoria had lost consciousness. It was unknown what would happen next. He hung up the phone and jumped out of the car, grabbed the safe, unbuckled Brutus, and ran. Reaching the hospital, he heard a guard yell, "No dogs!" as he sprinted after them. Ignoring this, he opened the door for Brutus, then followed him up the next 5 flights of stairs, busting through the door. Out of breath. It happened. Like blinking, he was there, and then he was gone. Brutus licked his face as he lay upon the ground. Nurses surrounding him now, and a doctor yelled from a room a few doors down, "She's alive!" Down the hall, in room 509, at approximately 12:31 p.m., Victoria Flangard was pronounced dead. At approximately 12:32 p.m., a man ran into the lobby with his dog and a safe, and died. Victoria was left to rest. Then she noticed a familiar tail wagging from behind her bedside curtain. "Brutus?" she whispered, and the dog walked out from behind the curtain and jumped onto the hospital bed. Ignoring his weight advantage and knocking her back into pillows, he licked her and whimpered. The doctor returned with the safe and a letter. "I'm sorry for all of the chaos outside your room. We've had a bit of a situation, and in the midst of that, this was left for you. The man who visited you earlier, I'm so sorry to say, is dead. These seem to be for you. I'm so sorry, Victoria. I know he was a friend." He motioned to the lockbox and then handed her the letter. He looked at the giant dog sitting on her bed and smiled. The security that had been chasing them was yelling about looking for Brutus. Giving Victoria a wink, Dr. Dulene closed the curtain. Victoria opened the letter, as Brutus nudged her elbow up to be under her arm. "Dear Victoria, I hope you know how sorry I am that I could not stay with you. If you're reading this, and I am dead, then my hunch was correct. I have never known a mind and a heart like yours, and I love you like you were my own daughter. I know your parents and grandmother felt the same pride in knowing you that I now feel. I'm lucky to have met you. Anyone who meets you is lucky. There are important documents in this envelope, pins and passwords. I've put my entire estate in your name. Brutus is now yours. I'm sure he'll love that. Keep on being the lightning you are. With love, your zombie, Sebastian." She held the note close and saw on the back of it was the combination for the lockbox. Reaching in, she found a photo which looked familiar. She was certain she'd seen it before. Looking closer, she saw why it looked familiar. She saw her. The photo had sat on the mantel at her grandmother's house for her whole life. There, sitting on Sebastian's lap, was her great-great-grandmother, Frances. She laid back, finding immense comfort in knowing that she had been visiting family each day for the past 6 weeks. She closed her eyes as Brutus laid his huge head on her chest and rested. She relaxed her eyes, knowing full well that she would open them tomorrow and many tomorrows to come. Hey everybody, welcome to After the Story with me. That story was really fun. I had a good time writing Finding Frances for a number of reasons. Number one, the idea of eternal life is always fascinating to me. I often think what I would do. I'm pretty sure I know what I would do. I would just slowly gather a library that would be just unparalleled, and I would protect that library with my eternity. That's just me because I'm a library nerd and I love books. But I don't know, everybody would handle it differently. But one thing that I think would be a through line is how we all would respond to not being able to see the people that we love from whatever life we had lived. So in the story, he's lived for a few hundred years and he's had multiple families. And the pain is that he can't visit them. And that's the beauty of the character of Victoria, is she becomes this surrogate daughter, only to later find out that she is literally related to this person that she just spent all this time with. And I wanted to create a character that was safe. So much of our culture has now been shaped by the truth of child abuse and the truth that it happens so prevalently. Anytime we see a strange adult and a child in the room together, of course, our senses are raised and we think only of all the horrible things that have happened and all the horrible people that have done those horrible things. I wanted to create a space and a character that was truly good, who did not have any nefarious intentions, no misleading, no grooming, no nothing. Just truly interested and caring about this little girl who is mysterious and who is clearly very confident and strong-willed. And I based Victoria off of a lot of different people that I knew growing up, a lot of different women who I really respect and who I love very much. And I knew little girls like this as well when I worked at elementary schools. And it really is incredible, the power that little girls have as kids, only for it to kind of slowly be pressed out of them by social pressures and culture and society at large. And whether or not you ascribe to the idea of a patriarchy or not, either way, it is apparent that for whatever reason, at some point, some women lose that power. And I wanted to create a character who presumably is never going to lose it. So, it seems that Victoria at this point, after losing literally everything and everyone, is still confident in who she is. And the bigger message behind that is the things that her parents and her grandma told her. She has this confidence because it was instilled in her. Sure, part of her personality might have been innate to just her nature and how she is as a human. But with that, of course, always comes the nurture. Those two are always working together in synchronicity. So this little girl didn't just all of a sudden discover that she was funny, that she had something to offer to the world, and that she was brave. Somebody had to remind her of those things and grow those things and instill those things. And clearly the adults in her life did. And I wanted that to be kind of a continuation for her as she met this new character that she calls her zombie. And I really love the through line of dogs. I think that if we all could live forever, we would at least have a pet that we would replenish with each lifetime. I don't know what it would be for everybody. It wouldn't be a dog for everybody. It could be, a snake or a guinea pig or a rat. But yeah, I love the idea that pets could kind of follow us from life to life as like an anchor to reality. Because they often are, right? Whether we admit it or not, our pets end up anchoring us to rhythm and routine and reality. And there is a beauty in that. But yeah, I really love this story. I love these characters. I love the idea of somebody being able to give away their eternal life. I don't see that a lot in literature and TV and movies. It usually is kind of an ultimatum where either, like somebody always has to give away or like lose something. But in this case, I think that the loss was really beautiful because he figured out that he loved her as a daughter and that that love was new and that it could be passed on. And I wonder too if there was regret on his part once he realized that he could pass it along to Victoria. I wonder if there was a regret that he didn't pass it along to Francis or to anybody else previously in his life who he had loved and wished could have come along with him in that journey. But yeah, I don't find it to be a tragedy at all. I think that, he had lived clearly a very long life, and that's really our make-a-wish wish is if we could give somebody who we believe deserves to be alive, who shouldn't be suffering, if we could give them our life and let them live for years to come, I think a lot of us would. There is kind of this narrative that we as a species are selfish, and I don't find that to be the case most of the time. Most of the time I find us to be very generous. And in this story, we find the ultimate show of generosity, which is to give one's life. What would you do? What would you lay down for a friend, as we've often been told? And I love their friendship. I think it's hilarious. I think that it was truly a gift for both of them to learn and grow and just, like I said, feel safe. Safety is something that a lot of us don't realize that people go their whole life never feeling. They live and they die never feeling safe. And, Victoria is in the orphanage, and there's the side joke about making a Catholic joke and then being a bad influence, which I found to be rather hysterical, only because when I worked at a private Christian school, elementary school, as a class aide, there was a couple kids who had some really hilarious jokes taking digs at their own worldview and their own religion. And these are like elementary school kids, so, 5th, 4th, 3rd grade. So I think we forget that kids are little sponges who can kind of repeat these very adult jokes in their inner circles, their peer circles. And they maybe don't get it, but we do. And that's what's fun about it. So all that to say, it was really fun, and I really enjoy this story, and I love the ending. I love that we find out that she was with family the whole time, that she was safe the whole time. Really just such a gift. And I hope that we all, if you're listening to this, I hope that we all can feel that, can feel safe, can feel secure, can feel loved. That's the goal. If we can feel that in life, then, well, that's life worth living. And once again, thank you so much for joining me and for listening to me ramble after the story. I so appreciate you. And I'll see you next time on Short Stories with Stefan. Bye-bye.